Welcome in the latest episode of that SEC podcast. I'm your host, Michael Bratton. I go by SEC Mike on Twitter. And I'm joined as always by my cousin Shane, who goes by Big Orange Balls on Twitter. What are you up to, you big Tennessee homer?
Hey, buddy, what's going on?
Oh, man, I'm just excited to be on here talking some SEC football once again with you. Everything's going great over here, man. How you doing?
Man, beautiful day, right? You know what I'm saying? It's like you couldn't have nailed it. You know, this weekend I bet it's gonna be raining, of course. You know, but no, here in East Tennessee we've had some gorgeous days back to back, and just been enjoying that, brother. Other than that, you know, any news I could get. Any little nugget of college football we've been soaking up here, and do you got any? Please say you got something for the listeners today, Mike.
Oh yeah, we got a little bit of nugget. We got a couple callers, call-in show. My buddy Jake Wimberly from ESPN Radio out of Mississippi, and he's got his CFB Hourglass projection. So we're going to get to all that, and I even got a little list for you, Shane. It's list season, ranking season, talking season. I think this is one I think you and the SEC audience are really going to love.
Okay, man. Again, no heads up on this one. I mean, I'm just as blind as you guys are. So let's just sit back and see what Mike's pulling out of the hat today.
All right, we'll get to that in just a second, Shane, but you want a nugget, here it is. I think it was just on the last episode we were talking about Auburn being connected to this former Nebraska Texas quarterback Casey Thompson. Well, he visited over the weekend. No commitment as of yet, but throw a little wrench in there, Shane, because Michigan State's starting quarterback, his name is Peyton Thorne. Yeah. He is apparently skyrocketed up the list for Auburn. So, hey, now if we're Auburn, we got all these options here, Shane. We got Michigan State starter. We got former Nebraska quarterback. So I think one of these guys, if not both, who knows? I mean, they're in such a position. I can't imagine they'll add both, but I believe they're going to add one of these guys. So, and I think whichever one they add is probably going to be their starting quarterback next season. So that we'll certainly have some reactions to that news, but could be a little shakeup on the Plains there if they got a quality quarterback there.
Yeah, laying two of them, wouldn't that be something? Yeah, I'm watching. I don't know what's going on in Michigan State. I really have. Have you been paying attention? I mean, it seems like not quite Colorado, but they are, you know, it's like an avalanche. And I was always afraid of this with the transfer portal, you know. Sometimes it giveth and sometimes it taketh away, and it's like it's not happened quite as bad. I mean, I would say Texas A&M was a little close there for a minute last year. It just felt like everybody's hit the panic button and getting into the portal. But, you know, it's one of those things that it's so fluid that it could go the wrong way and a whole team just implode like Michigan State. I mean, it's not going to be an easy rebuild up there. So do you know if anything? I've been loosely following the situation up there. Do you know anything about Michigan State?
No, I got to be honest with you, Shane. I don't, but you're right. I mean, starting quarterback won 11 games a couple years ago. I think two of their receivers have jumped into the portal. So clearly something behind the scenes is going on, but I wish I had some information. Maybe we got to have a Michigan State guy on here just to trash the Spartans. You know what?
Yeah, I mean, they're starting to their roster's starting to shape up the SEC, so I think we should know. And Colorado, that's another one. I think they've had like 30-something transfers. You know, it is absolutely nuts, man.
Right. Well, Shane, like I said, we got two questions from the callers before we get to Jake Wimberly and my little list here that we got. And again, if you want to be featured on the show, you want to give us a shout out, got a question, whatever, hit us up on that call-in line. It's at 615-965-5152, and that's in the show notes. If you didn't catch it there, it's on the screen. But let's kick it over to Tom, Shane, from all the way from Japan.
Ooh.
Hey, this is Tom Harlow calling in from Tokyo, Japan, and just wanted to say I appreciate listening to y'all every week. Just go Dogs. That's it. So, thank you. Bye-bye.
Well, Shane, I know you're a big fan of what is it, Tokyo, Little Tokyo, whatever
Well,
like that.
well, yeah, I love Little Tokyo. If I'm on a budget, I'll go over to, everybody's got that little sushi place that you can kind of trust. There's one of those in Morristown, but then there's like a whole bunch. You're like, nah, if you see lobster on the menu, you're like, there's no way that's going to be fresh. So only cooked sushi at those establishments.
Right, and the only reason I bring that up, Shane, because I thought that was the only Tokyo, Japan reference we'd ever have on this show. But how wild is it to think that, shout out Tom for calling in, but how wild is it that we got people listening to us two rednecks all the way from Japan? That just blows my mind,
man.
isn't it?
That lucky bastard eating whatever he wants. I'd love to go over there. I ain't gonna lie. My brother, your cousin, my brother, he went over there and he said it was like I stepped 10 years into the future. He I think he said something about like it was like Tron, and I was like, man, maybe I should check it out once, but there's no way to hell I'm gonna get my wife over there. I'll tell you that right now. So, but maybe one day me and you can head over there to Tokyo and get some real sushi.
Yeah. All right. And next, Shane, we got Kevin from Gainesville. He's got an interesting question that I wanted to touch on here.
Hey, this is Kevin from Gainesville, Florida. I'm a diehard dog fan, originally from North Georgia. But I got a question for you guys. What do you think should be done or what can be done about tampering? I was listening to your show yesterday about this quarterback from Notre Dame. He was an active player on Notre Dame's roster, and within days, he is rumored to be going to Alabama. Georgia also had a player, Big Bear Alexander, that entered the transfer portal and within an hour was already being rumored to be signing with USC, which he did officially. I guess it was yesterday. So, man, something's got to be done about these teams tampering with players on an active roster. What do you think can be done? What do you think should be done? I love you guys. Love the show. Keep the episodes coming.
All right, Shane, so clearly tampering is going on.
Yeah.
I mean, you said it perfectly the other day when this Notre Dame guy jumped in the portal. You said, oh, this is almost too convenient. That's because it is, because this is all being worked on behind the scenes, and it's not every single player. I'm not saying that, because there's many guys that go into the portal and they got nowhere to go, or they're getting forced out, like at Colorado you referenced. But these big-time players, tampering is clearly involved, and what can be done about it? I mean, here's the thing, Shane. I mean, they could do something about it, but nobody is going to want to do anything about it. You know why? Because they're all doing it. Every single one of these coaches. And if you could get every single one of them to not do it, then maybe we could get somewhere. But if there's the slightest bit of competitive advantage, people are going to exploit it. And that's what they're doing now. And they may not be outright doing it. I'm not foolish enough to say Nick Saban's calling up Buckner and saying, hey, jump in the portal, we'll get you.
No,
but I'm sure Tommy Rees probably, he recruited the kid. I think he's from out of California. Probably talked to his high school coach or a family member, and then that family member relayed it, hey, if you were to jump in the portal, they'd probably have a hope for you down there in Tuscaloosa. I mean, that's how these things are being done. And in the case he mentions Bear Alexander, I mean, I don't know for a fact, but it's a safe assumption. I'm sure he got a NIL deal before he jumped into that portal. And it's not just him. It's damn near every player that's committing out of the portal is getting an NIL deal to go to their new location. So until these coaches stop doing it, this is not going to stop, because they're all doing it, and there's no incentive to stop, because if Alabama stops doing it, Auburn's going to do it. If Georgia stops doing it, Florida's going to start doing it, because this is just so competitive, so much money on the line, jobs are on the line. There's just no stopping this, in my opinion.
No, there is no stopping, Mike. I mean, we're not reinventing recruiting here. This has been going on for years. 100 years probably. Right. They've been tampering with recruiting and making it lucrative wherever they want these kids to go to. So this is just another version of it. And yes, you're right. There is clearly tampering, but there's also, I guarantee, degrees of separation. It's like you said, it's not Nick Saban reaching out here talking to this kid, but in a closed room, he may have mentioned, hey, if this kid does come available, do everything we can to get him down here. But again, you better believe there are people coming to Nick Saban right now. Other schools, they're playing in other programs and saying, hey, if my son or if my nephew or whatever decides to get in the portal, is there a chance that he can get down here in Alabama? What would it look like? So it's murky, and it's kind of like underground. Nobody wants to talk about it, but we know it's existing, and it's going to continue to exist because nobody's going to rat on each other because then you get caught. It seems like most of the time when you get these NCAA violations, it's because you got popped, It's like, okay, clearly we got busted here, so let's go ahead and let's turn these infractions in, and try to lighten the load there. But until then, they're going to keep doing what they're doing.
Yeah, no doubt. All right, Shane. So here's my list, I want to explain this as thoroughly as I can.
Can I ask you before you go off that note?
Yes,
do
sir.
These kids have agents? When we talk these NILs, is there
they're allowed to have agents for NIL? I do know that.
Okay, so I wonder, man. I mean, these NIL guys probably hitting these kids up in high school, just going ahead and. I mean, I would imagine that's a dirty game being played right there, and I bet a lot of them getting taken advantage of. But I was just curious if maybe that was more, because first thing I thought was like Jimmy Sexton, not saying that he's involved or anything to do with it, but just saying, just kind of scouting around NIL contracts, and if he were in a different market, maybe makes 3 times what he's doing. So I'm just curious if what the agent. I never heard of a player's agent. I'm sure they exist though.
Oh yeah, no, for NIL, it's, to my understanding, it's perfectly legal. And I think Drew Rosenhaus, big-time NFL, he is the agent to many, many NFL superstars.
Oh, okay.
He's representing a lot of these Miami guys in NIL, is my understanding.
Shit. Okay.
All right, so let me, because I'm always worried that confusion. You don't comprehend exactly what these lists are. So let's make sure we totally
break out the
get
crayons when you're explaining to me here, Mike. Don't use them big words.
Not necessarily trap games, but that's kind of the best way to think of it. I picked out 10 games here, Shane, 10 SEC games.
Mm-hmm.
Here's what we all do, Shane, and we're all guilty of it. When the schedules come out, when the preseason magazines come out, you look at your team schedule and you say, all right, this is a win, that's a loss, toss up. That's the only 3 categories us fans have, right?
Yeah.
And so what this list is intended to be is I want games where one team is just automatically checking it as a win, the other is automatically checking it as a loss, and I'm saying hold on, because when these games arrive, I think they're a lot closer to a toss-up game than you might think right now. So does that make sense to you?
Yes. So not necessarily
I'm not
50-50
predicting
game.
upsets. I'm not saying all these teams are going to get upset, but I'm saying if you're circling this as a win, if you're circling this as a loss, you may need to reevaluate where you're thinking in the preseason.
This one, I get what you're saying right here. This is more of a toss-up game than people are letting on.
Exactly. So the main reason I wanted to do this list, Shane, number 1 on my list, I've been watching Devin Leary, this Kentucky quarterback. I'm all in on him. I think Kentucky upgraded at quarterback. Alabama, November 11th at Kentucky. I think Alabama fans assume automatic W. I think Kentucky fans, if they're being honest, automatic loss. But that's late in the year, Shane. Alabama has struggled on the road. Kentucky's got a hell of a lot better home field advantage than many people realize. That is at the top of my list right now, Shane, of a trap game, so to speak, where Alabama's going to have to play well because I think Kentucky can knock them off. Thoughts on that selection?
Yeah, I'm sure Kentucky fans like hearing that, I wouldn't call it quite a trap game. I'd call that high alert, Right. This is one that you just can't go in expecting a victory. I think of the Georgia-Missouri game last year. A team that has pieces and has the ability to put points on the board. Kentucky will be able to do that, and they also got enough defense to keep this thing competitive. So I'm just curious, the Alabama game, what do they got here before Kentucky? Or before and after? Do you got that pulled
yes,
up by
sir.
any chance?
They play Tennessee and LSU before Kentucky. So I mean that's going to be tough. And I'm not sitting here. I see where you're going with that Missouri Georgia comparison.
Yeah.
But I think there's a chance, not outright predicting it, Shane, but I think there's a chance. I mean, this could be like a game day type. I mean, Kentucky could have just one loss. They do play Georgia about a month before, but Missouri at home, Tennessee at home, at Mississippi State before they play Alabama. It's not crazy to think they beat all those teams, and they're on like a hot streak. So again, I'm not saying 3-3 Kentucky is going to knock off 9-0 Alabama. I'm saying a top hitting on all cylinders Kentucky, which a lot of people may not be realizing, could upend Alabama late in the season, particularly if it's cold. I mean, who wants to go up to Lexington when it's cold? And
I got you. And looking at that schedule, I could see that. I mean, obviously, we're talking a perfect storm here, but sometimes, man, a bumpy road is what makes these games a little bit more high alert, if you will. I mean, if they do lose to a Tennessee or if they do play Mississippi State close at home, then you're just kind of overlooking it and throwing that game away. And then next thing you know, you're in the third quarter there in Lexington saying, holy shit, we got a ball game, So,
right.
yeah, I'm with you here on this one, brother. This is an interesting matchup. I just like it because it's a game we haven't got to see in a long time, too.
Yep. All right, how about this one, Shane? I can't believe one side's already chalking this up as a W. One side's already chalking this up to a loss. And I'm just shaking my head over here, Shane. Because we've done this before. Tennessee at Florida, September 16th. By God, that's the biggest toss-up game I've ever seen in my life. All the pressure in the world is going to be on Tennessee, particularly if Florida does lose week 1 to Utah. I'm not saying they will, but if they do, they already have a loss. Mm-hmm. That's been a house of horror for them Vols. I mean, if Tennessee loses that game, I don't know. I mean, I'm not calling them a one-year wonder, but that narrative is going to start early if they lose to a Florida team that's already got a loss. I could already tell you how it's going to play out. Florida will look terrible against Utah. They'll struggle week 2 against McNeese. And Tennessee will be a 10-point favorite. And
yeah.
Oh, man.
Some third-string quarterback rolls in Gainesville and kicks her ass, Yeah, I've seen this story too, Mike. I mean, it's been, 17 years? It's been a rough go. So,
yeah.
I would be lying if I told you I wasn't in the camp of saying this is a blowout opportunity. This is the best shot we've got to just destroy the Florida Gators. But I'd also be lying if I wasn't saying the devil behind me saying, you sure about that? Are you sure about that? Because I am not sure about that. Anybody that's ever watched the Tennessee-Florida matchup, you always know you're going to get a hell of a game. And most of the time it doesn't go the Volunteer way. But, again, I'm a homer, and I am one of those in the camp. So I am not marking this as a guaranteed victory by no means.
Okay. Well, at least you're not right now. We'll see down the road.
Let me see him after Austin Peay. You know what I'm saying?
How about this one, Shane? I don't think enough people are circling this game. I think this is a big, big, big game here. Arkansas at LSU, September 23rd. Hell, last time Arkansas went down to Baton Rouge, they won. I realize different coaching staff and everything like that for the Tigers, but I think there's a real chance that Arkansas is undefeated. They just have to beat Western Carolina, Kent State, and BYU all at home. So this will be their first road game. It'll be tricky. LSU will be coming off a Mississippi State game. Could be a real tough game. I think this is a big, big trap game that many LSU chalking up as an automatic win. Arkansas, not saying they're chalking it up as an automatic loss, but it's one they really got to, I just think the upset, if you even want to call it that, potential is real for this one. Maybe Arkansas is legit.
Yeah, I think one of the problems too, or I don't want to call it problems, but Arkansas has got a kind of a tough little schedule here. After that BYU, there's no Saturdays off, and I think sometimes that helps. When you pencil in a cupcake, you kind of have these ups and downs, and you don't practice as hard because you blew a team out by 40 points. Well, Arkansas is not going to have that luxury. It's going to be a damn fight after that BYU game. So, I could definitely see this as a matchup, as a tight matchup last year. Why? And I think, both teams, in my opinion, are improved. So why won't we have a tight game this year?
And it kind of reminds me a little bit, Shane, of years ago when Mississippi State, they went into Baton Rouge, same thing. Dak Prescott, that was his breakout performance. Of course, KJ's, people that really pay attention to this stuff, he's already broken out, but he's got a lot of doubters still. I don't understand why. Yeah. But they had to beat LSU, and then they had another top 5 showdown with Auburn, and another top 5. It was big time game after big time game. They kept on winning. That's how they ascended to number 1 in the nation. I'm not sitting here pump the brakes. I'm not saying Arkansas is going to be number 1. But, hell, they won't be if they don't beat LSU. But if they do, the path to, being a top 5, being a top 10 team is there in front of them.
Absolutely, man. No, that's one of those teams that if they catch fire early in the season, easily going to be a top 10 matchup. So, going to be a hell of a game no matter what.
Now, I've already referenced this one on a podcast previous we've done, Shane. I've already outright predicted the upset, so I got to throw this one on there. Alabama at Auburn in the Iron Bowl, November 25th. Again, I think Auburn will be much better at the tail end of the season than the beginning. If this was a week 1 matchup, Shane, I'd probably pick Alabama by 28 points. You know what I mean? But I just think there's magic on the plains late in the year. They could catch fire. Again, this is one, even though I've already predicted the upset, I'm not sitting here saying the upset. I'm saying this could be a hell of a lot more like a toss-up. Because, hell, Brian Harsin nearly knocked off Alabama. I think Hugh Freeze can do it this year.
Yeah, and you know what I like about this one is just how that schedule, especially Auburn's schedule, is at the end of the season. They've got a real opportunity to end the season strong with a lot of victories and momentum. And that, I think, some people say momentum ain't real. Man, I think it is, brother. I think, when you start putting some W's under your belt and you make a bowl game, something that these kids didn't get to do last year, and Hugh Freeze and company are all kicking at the same time, I think there's an opportunity. And it's funny about Alabama and Auburn. It's like if you remove the rivalry, if you just take Team A and Team B and you put them on a neutral site, you're gonna say Alabama's gonna win by a ton of points. But the fact that it is a rivalry and the fact that it is on the plains, it's like you naturally reduce the points because it's going to be a closer game than just any other matchup that Bama has. So, yeah, obviously Bama's not going to be sleeping on Auburn in the Iron Bowl here, but I think this game's going to be closer than the experts say.
Now, how about this one, Shane? Again, we got to be cautious every time we mention the Bulldogs maybe losing a game here. I'm not saying until they lose one, I'm probably never picking them to lose another one. But everybody's talking about this trip to Tennessee. I got my sights set the week before, Shane. Ole Miss comes to Athens at Georgia, November 11th. I just think there's a potential to be a lot more of a toss-up type game. I think Lane Kiffin could have that thing really rolling. If he gets strong quarterback play, may have upgraded through the portal. I think Ole Miss could be a very, very dangerous team, in particular if Georgia is looking ahead to Tennessee. Ole Miss at Georgia. Thoughts on that being maybe a little bit more of a toss-up than people are viewing right now?
That's where we're at, Mike, in 2023, trying to figure out which potential loss Georgia can have. Just one. Not multiple, which is the trap game. And do you have Georgia on? And I don't want to give it away, but I am curious. Do you have Georgia anymore on this list?
No, this was the only one.
Okay, so this is the game.
This is basically me trying to put Georgia on them somewhere.
Yeah, you had to pencil them in and come up with a fun story here. No, I think you're right. And one of the things that it's all going to boil down to is quarterback play from Ole Miss. I think we're starting to get into that dark camp, and if he really does take that next step and runs this lane system like we know that his offenses can produce, then yeah, man, I can be convinced that this is a close game. I'm not necessarily saying it's a upset alert, but it is a potential trap game because nobody's going to think that Ole Miss can beat the Georgia Bulldogs. So, yeah, interesting one. Didn't even think about this. Out of all the games that Georgia has this year, this is the one that you're say, hey, pump the brakes. Don't overlook these guys.
Yeah. All right, how about this one, Shane? I'm loving this game the more that we get closer and closer to the season because everybody's hyping up them South Carolina Gamecocks, Shane. But you know what they say when they talk about the Gamecocks? They say, well, they got to play North Carolina. They go to Georgia. They go to Tennessee. And you know what? They just completely overlook, Shane, that Mississippi State Bulldogs coming into town. That's a game, September 23rd, on my radar that I think South Carolina's got to be very, very careful because Mississippi State's a hell of a lot better program than people want to give them credit for.
Yep.
They play in the rugged SEC West. I realize Columbia is a tough place to play. But here's the other thing, Shane, and this is not South Carolina's fault, but it's a lot tougher to play at night in Columbia.
Yeah.
And just think, this is also something I factored in. When ESPN is setting these schedules, you think they're going to say, oh, Mississippi State, South Carolina, let's make that the prime time Saturday night slot.
No.
I don't think so.
Welcome to noon, my friend.
I think that exactly. I think they're going to say, let's put this as a nooner. And that's when these away teams catch a napping. I think that's a big one that South Carolina cannot overlook.
That's a good point, Mike. I don't think about it because that's, naturally, as a Vol fan, I've got them penciled in. I can't wait to play them. They're going to be looking for them Tennessee Vols. They're going to be coming off a tough game with the Georgia Bulldogs. Yeah, man, this is a great spot. This is 101 trap game right here. 12 o'clock, Mississippi State, no cowbells in sight. Come on now, this is going to be a tight one. So, and if you come ill-prepared and Mississippi State's dialed in and play some physical football, which I think that's what they're going to be leaning on this year, South Carolina could have their hands full. So, yeah, this will be an interesting matchup and could be a hell of a game.
Now, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this one, Shane. Let's see if you can set your orange bias aside here. Tennessee at Missouri, November 11th. Ooh. Josh Heupel has owned Missouri as Tennessee's coach. It's kind of like the curse of Heupel since he left as offensive coordinator. But I think that's one you got to watch as Missouri's defense. If they continue to get better, if they get some production out of the offense this year, we both think Missouri can be much, much improved. Similar to last year, Tennessee whooped South Carolina 2 years ago. Mm-hmm. We just completely overlooked that trip to South Carolina, and they paid the ultimate price for it. I think Missouri is one that could sneak up on Tennessee this year. Thoughts on that one?
Yeah, I thought you were going to say Georgia may sneak up on them, but I get you. No, I'm just kidding. I'll take my biased hat off for a second. And, one of the things is when Mizzou came to town last year, that was a ball game, man.
Yeah,
that was like it's like the recipe got out on how to defend the Tennessee Vols, and there's only a handful of defenses that were capable of locking down with those cornerbacks, and Missouri has one of those. The problem they ran into, they just didn't have enough depth. They could not go toe-to-toe to the very end. I think they got more depth this year. It is at home, and like you said, yeah, that's a tough game. You're looking at it as a Vol fan, easy W. But when it gets a little bit closer, there's that, in the back of your mind, you start thinking, well, if it's like last year and a couple breaks don't go our way, do we lose? So I'm with you. Trap game. Not necessarily, I wouldn't call it a 50-50 game, but it is one that easily could be overlooked and catch the Volunteers off guard.
And another reason I like it, Shane, you know who Tennessee plays the following week?
Georgia.
Yeah, so,
Georgia Bulldogs.
I mean, they might be caught looking ahead. You know, particularly, I'm not saying it's going to happen, but particularly if they're both undefeated at that point in time.
Yeah.
You know what?
Yeah, that would be tough. Got them at home. Yeah, that would be. I mean, that's. I'm trying not to say trap game. I've already done it like 15 times. You know, I'm trying to come up. What's the definition of? I'm sorry, man. This is why you tried. What is the word for you try to find another word like that?
Like a
starts
synonym?
with an S. Synonym?
Yeah.
Yeah. See, I was going to Google that, another synonym for a trap game, so I didn't sound like an idiot. But yeah, this is it. Overlooking Mizzou to get to Georgia. That could happen.
How about this one, Shane? Arkansas at Florida. Of course, maybe that's a toss-up already, but I would imagine most Florida fans assume they'll beat Arkansas. Arkansas fans are always confident in their team, so I'm not saying they're scheduling a loss here, but it's never easy to go into the swamp and get a win. I think this is a lot more of a toss-up game than a lot of people want to make it out to be.
Yeah, a little bit of a toss-up game. The only reason I would say not is Arkansas does have a week off prior to this one. So sometimes it feels like when you got 2 weeks to prepare for a matchup, you don't overlook them as much, but definitely going to be a tough-fought game. And it is one of those that if you poll the Florida Gators, they're like, oh, yeah, easy dub. And then you do the Arkansas, they're like, oh, there's no way we're losing to the Florida Gators. So one of those fan bases will be hurt that Saturday for sure.
Yeah. All right, how about this one, Shane? Kentucky, again, high on Kentucky here. At South Carolina late in the year, November 18th. Kentucky has owned South Carolina, at least until last year. But, they were down with their quarterback there. So I think that's another one where you got to be careful, Shane. This is not going to be an automatic W for South Carolina. You look at South Carolina's last four, Jacksonville State, Vanderbilt, Kentucky, Clemson. We assume that they'll just be on a wave of momentum going into that Clemson game, all at home. There's a chance they win them all. I'm not saying they can't, but, man, you cannot overlook it. We know Mark Stoops hates Shane Beamer, so they're gonna be locked. They're gonna be locked in for this one, I feel like.
Yeah, that's one of the things. Like when I'm thinking about these games that just pop up on us, it's sometimes you're overlooking them, and I just don't see any scenario where Kentucky overlooks South Carolina or South Carolina overlooks Kentucky. This thing's turned into a little bit of a heated rivalry, and I love it. So this is going to be a tough game, and I would argue closer to a 50-50 matchup than more of a trap scenario.
Now, final one on my list here, Shane. Let me know what you think about it. Florida at South Carolina, October 14th. They have traded. 2 years ago, South Carolina blew them out. Last year, Florida blew them out. So, I think naturally you assume, okay, the revenge game, it's in Columbia, they'll get their revenge back. But, Shane, all the trash I've been talking about the Gators, first of all, I just assume it's going to come back to bite me. That's number one. But second, they're hearing all this stuff.
Yeah.
This is, again, they're not on Georgia, Alabama's, LSU's level, but they're still one of the most talented rosters. We're about to talk with Jake Wimberly. He's got Florida right now as a college football playoff talent profile team.
Yeah.
So, this is not a team devoid of talent by any means. I could see them, just proving all the idiots like me wrong, winning 9-10 games. And the only way that's going to happen is by winning these games at South Carolina. I'm throwing this as a potential toss-up as well.
Well, yeah. I think you're right, brother. And the timing of that game couldn't be better, I think, for the Florida Gators. So, yeah, they got a week off after that one. Prepare for Georgia, so it's not like they're really going to be overlooking them. And so you're going to get the best Florida Gators action in that one. So I think that one's going to be just a fun one to watch, brother, because I think – that game got personal, it felt like it woke up that locker room of South Carolina's after it, it's like, there was a lot of us, myself included, thinking, damn, this team is going to implode. This is it. This is the last we're going to have to hear from South Carolina, but it is almost like it flipped a switch. So don't think that they're not going to be remembering that when they step on the field, and the Florida Gators the same way. I think that's going to be a program that's going to have to fight their ass off this season to get the accolades they deserve. And, another one, Florida games that I'm looking forward to is the LSU. I think that's another matchup that's always tight. You could kind of throw the records out here, and LSU probably going to be moving along, competing for a West championship, and then all of a sudden the Florida Gators come into town and mix things up. So Florida's got an interesting schedule, and it's definitely one that's going to have a lot of tough fought games in.
This is what we do all summer, Shane. We talk ourselves out of these teams, and then we talk them right back in a week later. You know what?
The Gators don't belong in the bottom of the SEC. It just doesn't feel natural. And it feels like there's going to be a moment where similar to South Carolina, that light switch hits and says, you know what? Hey, we are one of the top teams in the SEC. When are we going to start acting like it? So it may be in 23, it may be in 26. I don't know. But at some point, just like some of these other programs, they're going to make a rise to the top.
Mm-hmm. All right, let's kick it over now to our interview. Shane, really great stuff from Jake Wimberly, host of the Afternoon Drive ESPN Radio out of Jackson, Mississippi, and owner of the CFB Hourglass. All right, we're pleased to be joined by a friend of the show, Jake Wimberly. Does an outstanding job hosting the Afternoon Drive ESPN Radio out of Jackson, Mississippi, and of course also the owner of the CFB Hourglass.com website. Does an outstanding job with all that. And the Hourglass just debuted for the 2023 season. So, Jake, can't thank you enough for joining the show.
Michael, I always appreciate you. Love the set. It always looks great. Hey, is that a Jared Lorenzen doll?
It is, yeah. A fan actually sent that out to me. I think they did a bunch of them for charity, and we are huge fans of Jared Lorenzen, so it's an honor to have him. And we got the book here from Mike Leach. I mean, people that affect us, we want to praise them, especially when they're gone,
Absolutely. Well, I appreciate you having me today. And, hey, we're under that 150 mark, college football here before you know it.
Yeah. So we've had you on before, but I'm sure we got new listeners that have not caught your appearances talking about the CFB Hourglass. Before we get into some of these projections, can you give the audience just a brief overlay of what the CFB Hourglass is?
Sure. Yeah. And for those that haven't heard any of my work, I'm on ESPN 105.9 The Zone in Jackson, Mississippi, every day, 3 to 6. Program director there for the station as well. Background in engineering, civil engineering, and mathematics from Mississippi State 2000. Worked private, publicly, in civil engineering for a long time. But over the years, everybody loves to pick up the old magazine. Here in about a month, we'll get them. The old Lindy's, the Athlons. I still go to the stores. I still pick them up. I want to hold it in my hand, flip through the pages. Been doing it since I was a kid. And we all like to take that schedule and go, okay, yeah, hey, South Carolina's going to beat this team. They're going to lose to this team. And we'll say, okay, they're going to be 6-6 or 7-5. Well, this is just my twist. And there's several people out there that do this, from the Dave Bartus of the world, the Kelly Fords, that have their own models. This is my model that I've been working on for about 8 or 9 years, where we use mathematics to try to predict and project college football. It's not exact. Typically just on a scale 1-to-1, just predicting games, around 80%. We take these now and use them for our Vegas lines as well. I'm a grand ambassador for Ameristar Casino in Vicksburg, Mississippi. Been there for 5 years doing all of their sports gaming stuff in conjunction with our show. So we use it against the spread. They enjoy it. It's fun. So it's just a great model, or at least in my mind, my model that predicts college football, not just in the SEC, but around the country. And sometimes you hit it right on the head, and then sometimes you don't. There's been times where it's fallen on its head. Not everything is perfect, but it is a predictor model for college football.
Yeah, and this is really in-depth stuff. We'll put a link to the CFB Hourglass in the show notes, because I recommend all the audience to go check it out. It's not just SEC content, but of course, all the SEC teams well covered by Jake over at CFB Hourglass. But I wanted to start with you, Jake. Teams, according to your model, that have championship level talent out of the SEC. I mean, everybody and their mother could tell you Alabama, Georgia, and I think even LSU. Any surprise that Texas A&M, Florida, I'm already seeing blowback for Florida, and Tennessee, those are the 6 out of the SEC that have championship-level talent. Again, Alabama, Georgia, LSU, A&M, Florida, and Tennessee. Any surprise that let's start with Florida, that Florida made that list?
Well, some are surprised by that. And here's what we got to remember here. And I apologize for Miss Zoe going through here, getting a charger here. I break the talent down in 3 different levels. One, there's the championship level. That would mean anybody that's got talent that has that talent level that can possibly win the national title. So that would mean, hey, if Florida's playing in the ACC or if they're playing in a different conference just on talent alone, they can possibly win the national title. The second level is to punch a ticket to, that's about number 17 to about 25 or 30. They have enough talent to where they can possibly make the college football playoff. The third is outside that realm. They pretty much don't have a shot. Now, TCU was right on that line last year. They were able to do it. But remember, this is talent alone. It's only one portion of the equation. The problem that we get into is in the SEC is where, for instance, Mississippi State and Ole Miss, they have top 25 talent. But then they're also matched up against a more talented team in LSU this week. Next week, they may have a more talented team against A&M. And then also they may have to play an equal talented team in South Carolina. So just because it says that, top 25 doesn't mean necessarily they're going to win every game. If you don't believe it, that the SEC has that many talented teams, just look at the NFL draft.
Yeah, and to your point, I mean, we hit on the national championship level talent. Like you said, the SEC teams with playoff talent, it's virtually it's every team aside from Vanderbilt, which just makes this such a competitive league that makes it so tough to project. But I thought it was pretty interesting, Jake, that even Missouri, Mississippi State, Kentucky, all above South Carolina at number 27. Does that, and we'll get to your coach ranks here in a second, but are you surprised that South Carolina is getting so much hype considering you've got them number 27 when it comes to roster talent, and then Shane Beamer, again, we'll get to him in a second, but a little bit further down your list. So are you as high on the Gamecocks as many others?
I do like South Carolina. I like what Shane Beamer's done. I wasn't a big fan of Shane Beamer, nothing personal when he got the job, but when you look at the way that he's worked the transfer portal, he's gone in, he pulled a couple guys out of the state of Mississippi as well. They've come into the state of Mississippi, pulled some kids out of here. He's done a really good job recruiting. He's high energy. We know that. The guys seem to like him. The players like him. So, yeah, and, South Carolina, for instance, at 27, and let's just say Florida, I don't have my list in front of me, at, 15, that's really only 3 or 4 players over the course of 3 or 4 years that can change those rankings. So, it's not surprising to see a team like Missouri, who maybe is down that list a little bit, upset a team like Florida or play Georgia to the wire on a given Saturday. So, yeah, but to answer your question, I do like South Carolina. I feel like there's an arms race of sorts in the SEC East right now after Georgia. Is it going to be Tennessee, who looks like they have a little leg out in front, Florida, or is it going to be South Carolina or even Kentucky for that second spot?
Now, jumping to your coach rankings, Jake, I'm not surprised, but I think some people might be. Kirby Smart, number 1, Nick Saban, number 2, and this is not just in the SEC, but obviously in the entire country. How close was that in your model, and did that surprise you at all, or not really, considering Georgia, heck, they just won back-to-back national championships?
Yeah, I tend to look at coaches a little differently than others. Now, if we go full scale, it's all relative into how you're looking at it, at coaches or players. If we go for the history of a coach's life, Nick Saban's number 1. I don't go for the whole coach's life. I go on about a 3-year window, and actually it is on 3 years. And that includes top 25 wins, top 25 losses. All of this works into the coach's model. Wins on the road, wins at home, losses ding you big time if you lose to an FCS opponent. Over the last 3 years, and I think the records show it, Kirby Smart has moved ahead of Nick Saban. 2 back-to-back national champions, what he's done in recruiting. The margin is still very, very small. But over this year, this is the first year I've been doing this. I've been doing this the 8th year that any coach has moved past Nick Saban as the number 1 coach. Kirby Smart did it this year, but it's by just a little bit.
Now, I was very interested, Jake. Your model's got Hugh Freeze as the number 7 coach in the country. And again, going back to SEC teams with playoff caliber talent, Auburn right at 17. you can combine those figures. Of course, we got another one to get to here, but considering the coach, considering the talent, are people sleeping on Auburn? Do you think that's a fair assessment?
Probably so. Now, do I think Auburn is going to have an LSU and Brian Kelly jump from last year? Probably not. But Auburn has proven, I mean, again, we look at Auburn and say, man, Brian Hartson, that was a bad program, not a really good team. But, I mean, they went to Starkville and almost beat Mississippi State, lost that game in overtime. You wake up on a given Saturday, Auburn's still in a ball game. They've got players. They just don't have the right players in certain positions. And you look at Hugh Freeze, a lot of that coaching model comes from what he did, obviously all of it, what he did at Liberty. We don't take into account anything he did at Ole Miss. But if you look at the history of Hugh Freeze, he's been a winner everywhere he's been. He was able to take Ole Miss, and he's a developer of quarterbacks. I think Hugh Freeze is one of the more underrated coaches in the country. I don't know that he'll necessarily make that jump this year. In 2 years, I could see it. But if Alabama has problems at quarterback, by the end of the year, as we know that Iron Bowl goes, Auburn very well could upset Alabama down on the Plains.
Now, you got Jimbo Fisher as the 13th best coach in the entire country. I have to imagine he rated a lot higher this time last year in your model.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, when you look at the loss to App State, that definitely dings him last year, or coming into this year. You look at him flipping the record to 5-7. It definitely dinged him. I mean, he was sitting in the top 10 annually over the last several years, but yeah, that moved him outside the top 10. We know how important this year is for him, bringing in Bobby Petrino, Jimbo Fisher, kind of moving in the wrong direction.
I said I would get to Shane Beamer. You got him number 40 right now. What's it going to take for him to take that big jump up? And is that in part due to the fact that you really only got 2 years of data for him to, I mean, he's an outstanding assistant. He's been that his entire career and recruiter, but we only got 2 years of data as him as a head coach. Does that factor in at all with his overall coaching grade?
No, you bring up a great point. It absolutely does. So when you have a coordinator, Dave Bartu and his group do a great job of ranking coordinators. I don't do that. One, I don't have the time to rank coordinators, to be honest with you. That's a lot of work. But two, when a coordinator takes over as a head coaching job, I kind of have what I call an identifier. If you're an offensive guy, you're going to get this number. If it's a blanket number, it's just kind of a starting point. If you're a defensive coordinator in the head coaching spot, it's going to be a little less, just because offense, you score more points, that kind of stuff. So, yeah, the data, there's not enough. And as you continue to move along and he continues to be successful, that number will move and climb. Same way with quarterbacks. I got a question on Twitter about Joe Milton, why he was so low in the quarterback rankings. Well, the quarterback rankings, and I know we haven't got to that yet, but just to kind of the same degree, the quarterback rankings are based on data from last year. So it's all kinds of stuff, again, put into the model, completion percentage, all kinds of different stuff goes into it. So Milton, we only have a small sample size. Yay through 10 touchdowns, no picks. He doesn't have a big enough sample size to rate against a Will Rogers who played a full year, A.J. Jefferson. So by default, he's going to go down a little bit. Same way with Georgia quarterbacks, Alabama quarterbacks, Ohio State quarterbacks, guys that we don't know. Yes, they're highly rated players, but I don't include star ratings in the quarterbacks. It's strictly on on-field production. So you may look at Georgia's quarterbacks and go, wow, they're in the high 30s. That's no way. Probably not. But that's where they ended up in the model. As we move through the year, when we start talking about working Vegas lines and stuff, quarterback ratings start to change. All that starts to change to give you as accurate as possible a number for a team.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, Jay, because I was going to ask you, why do you hate Joe Milton? That was my next question.
Right. Long but distinguished list.
Yeah. Well, there's no SEC quarterbacks, according to your model, in the top 10, which, again, that'll change, like you said. But was that a surprise, or is that? Do you think that gives you an indication that we're lacking some star power short of Jaden Daniels, KJ Jefferson, and you got Will Rogers, number 12, and Devin Leary, who I'm very high on as I go back and watch him as well. Those are your four top SEC quarterbacks. Were you surprised that there were no top 10 quarterbacks out of the SEC?
A little bit after getting into the numbers, but then you think about it, and every conference goes through this. There's shelf lives for big-time quarterbacks, and then they cycle off. I mean, Stetson Bennett went way up the charts based on what he did at Georgia the last 2 years. Bryce Young, we know he was at the top. But when you look at the production out west with Caleb Williams at USC, Michael Penix Jr. at Washington, Bo Nix, what he was able to do at Oregon, you look at some of the other quarterbacks around the country, at Duke and at North Carolina, they are just more productive quarterbacks. So I think it's just the shelf life of the SEC is kind of resetting itself, and you very well could see, a Georgia quarterback move into that top 10. You could see a Devin Leary at Kentucky move into that top 10, or a Will Rogers. So yeah, right outside the top 10, a little surprising, but when you kind of look at the landscape of college football, not that surprised.
Well, Jake, I wanted to ask you about your national championship projection, and I wanted to save that to the end here because I don't want the audience to just turn off immediately and wonder who in the heck is this nut job that's got Michigan winning the national championship over Georgia. Have you seen Michigan in the college football playoff? They can't even beat TCU. Please explain your model here, Jake.
Absolutely. So, look, it's a risky pick. It's not just reaching for something here. What I look at is this. Okay, a couple things. One, the talent has to be there. And you can read about this on CFB Hourglass.com. I tier it out 3 different tiers. A bronze tier, a silver tier, and a gold tier. That's the teams that I think have a shot. You can be a bronze team and still get into the college football playoff. But to win it, you've got to have a couple things. One, you got to be extremely talented. We know that. You look at the past champions. You look at Georgia, number 1 recruiter in the country. You look at Alabama, always when they win it, number 1 recruiter in the country. Clemson, top 5 recruiter in the country. So you got to have that. There are no Cinderellas in college football. TCU tried to put on the slipper last year. Heck of a run, but we saw what happened when they actually lined up against Georgia. It wasn't pretty. The thing was over in 7 minutes. But so you put the talent in, 1. 2, you got to have the coaching. Got to have really, really good coaching. Kirby Smart's proved it. Nick Saban's proved it. Dabo Swinney. Now he's suffering a little bit from some of the turnover on his staff. And I blanket head coaches as like a CEO. So whenever, Saban loses a coordinator, it's up to him to get another one. If you're running a business and you lose your main point guy and whatever business that you're running or girl, it's up to you to replace them. So your coaches have to be there. Then you have to have the quarterback play. So you look at the quarterback play for the national championship over the last, you can go back a gazillion years. Look at what Trevor Lawrence did. Look at what, Tua Tagovailoa was able to come off the bench and do. Look at, any quarterback along the way. Look at Joe Burrow at LSU. Got to have elite quarterback play to win a national title. Then your offensive and defensive scoring efficiency numbers have to be 15 or in. Literally, offensive scoring efficiency, defensive scoring efficiency. If you don't believe it, there's a story. I need to pull it, and it's deep on that website, and I'll refresh it. Showing that absolutely does exist. If you look at Georgia last year, they were in the top 3 in both categories. LSU, the year Joe Burrow won it, LSU was number 1 in offensive scoring efficiency, but they were sitting around 17th defensively. And actually, always say you can look at the efficiency numbers. It's kind of like a stock market watching college football. As teams go, see teams, especially if say I had 7 undefeated teams halfway through the year. Some of those are paper tigers, and you can look at them and tell by their efficiency numbers. One this year is going to be probably USC. A lot of people are going to put USC, as a dark horse or a chance to win because of Caleb Williams, and that is understandable. And they will likely be the number 1 team in the country in offensive scoring efficiency. But they were 108th last year in defensive scoring efficiency, and that's going to get you dinged along the way. So back to your question about the national championship, I do have Georgia taking on Michigan. Both teams recruit inside the top 5, advantage Georgia. Head coaching wise, Kirby Smart and his staff really good. Jim Harbaugh, really, really good. We look at Jim Harbaugh. We clown on Jim Harbaugh a lot. He's won everywhere he's been. He won at San Diego State. He won at Stanford. He's won at Michigan. He won at the NFL. He's quietly put together a really good staff, coaches it really well. Georgia runs it really well. Also, Michigan runs it really well. They got an 18 touchdown running back coming back this year, plus another guy who went for 1,000 yards as well. So, and believe it or not, Michigan is built somewhat like Georgia. They have, and I think that's by design. Not necessarily Georgia, but you're seeing almost a change in the way teams are playing offensively, where when we got to 4 wide and everybody was throwing it all over the field, we thought that's where we're at. Georgia kind of went away from that. They started running the ball. They throw it when they need to. They play good defense. Use the tight end game. Michigan runs it, uses the tight end game. But I think the linchpin is J.J. McCarthy at Michigan. He played in last year's playoff. He's a seasoned quarterback now. And, Georgia, we'll see what that quarterback situation looks like. But I think McCarthy, being the more experienced guy, he's going to be an NFL guy. He's already put on a lot of lists as a first or second round pick next year. To me, the edge is at quarterback, and I think that's where it's at. I think Michigan can run it just like Georgia can. I think they can play defense not as good as Georgia, but pretty darn close. My edge is only because of McCarthy. Now, if Georgia, it's this quarterback thing worked out, they may run roughshod to a three-peat.
All right, Jake, I really appreciate all your time. Final question for you. I mean, everybody, even your model, Georgia, that's favorites in the East. If you were to ask most people who's maybe a second tier in the East, it's probably going to be Tennessee. In the West, everyone's going to have Alabama or LSU. I don't think anyone, aside from homers, is going to have anyone but those four teams potentially winning those divisions. Based on your model, your numbers, and everything, just stars align, everything breaks right. Maybe it would take a TCU-type run, but could you pick one West team and one East team to kind of keep your eye on, not to sit here and say you're picking them to win their division, but if the stars align, maybe a team from each division that could pull off a major upset?
Yeah, we're talking outside of the LSU, Alabama, Georgia ranks, right?
Yes, sir, and Tennessee. I'll throw them in there.
Oh, Tennessee in there, absolutely. Let's go Arkansas in the SEC West. A.J. Jefferson and the way they played, they can play offense. If they stay healthy, they're going to be a handful. And Sam Pittman has Arkansas playing as physical. And again, notice the trend. Georgia, physical, physical, physical. Michigan, physical. Alabama's trying to get back to more physical football. Arkansas is as physical a football team as you're going to run up on. So I like Arkansas. Look for the Arkansas Razorbacks. If we were going to have a team to kind of upset the apple cart. And if we're going to the other side, let's go South Carolina. If Spencer Rattler, we talk about elite quarterback play, can bottle what he had at the end of the year last year, and he becomes the guy that he was at Oklahoma. We forget this. Spencer Rattler was a preseason number one draft guy. I mean, they had him at the top of every draft board. He fell off the wagon at Oklahoma. Caleb Williams surfaced, and it was over. If Spencer Rattler can bottle that up and be that kind of guy again, watch out for South Carolina. So let's go Arkansas and South Carolina.
All right, Jake, I can't thank you enough. Before you go, can you tell the audience where's the easiest, best place to find all your work?
Yeah, just go to, follow me on Twitter at Jake Wim. You'll see everything there. I put the podcast up there. It's on Apple iTunes, the Afternoon Drive with Jake Wimberly, CFB If you want to stream our show, if you're outside the state of Mississippi, just go to thezone1059.com. You can always find me on Facebook, Jake Wimberly. It's an open account. So I'm really just kind of Google me and you'll see where we're at. But just Twitter's the best place at Jake Wim.
All right, Jay. So great stuff as always from Jake. Man, I wish I had the brain power to do computer analytics and all that, but some pretty fascinating stuff. And what I love about this, Shane, I mean, this is not his opinion. This is his model. And how about it, Shane? I mean, basically the entire SEC's got the talent profile, according to Jake, to make a run at the college football playoff. That's exactly what all these fans want to hear.
That's awesome, man. He reminds me it's like Pinky in the Brain, so like, you know what I'm saying? Like he was the brain. I'm Pinky trying to figure out how to spell synonym. And, I mean, that's just where we're at, brother. There are definitely just two different types of people out there. So no, this is awesome. Awesome interview. Always great to have him on. It just feels like I get smarter every time I hear him, so we need to have some more smart people on this show, Mike.
Yep. Well, there's none on between you and I, trust me. But, hey, brother, you got anything before we hop off the line?
No, man. I mean, you'd think we wouldn't have any news, and here we are loaded with it. So, again, if you get an opportunity, there's a lot of people that are calling in with ideas. We're not putting them on the air and all that, but, hey, we're marking these down and appreciate it. There's some great ones, Mike. Yeah. Some that we are in the works of, we were in the process of doing anyway. We just, we haven't got the infrastructure yet to accomplish them. But if you got an idea for a show or anything like that, it doesn't necessarily need to be aired. Again, give that hotline a buzz and, help us. I mean, that's what we're doing. We're doing the show that you guys want. So if there's something you want to hear or something you want to go over, feel free to let us know. We'll definitely expand on it.
Yeah, and that number is 615-965-5152. But that's going to do it, brother, for this episode of the show. I appreciate you, as always, and I appreciate each and every one of you for checking us out. We'll catch you on the next one.
All right. See you guys. Go Vols.